Okay, now let's take a look at I, and we'll look at J as well in this quick multimedia presentation. Calculate the PE ratios for Kennedy and Strasberg for 2007. Are these PEs reasonable in view of relative growth, payout, and ROE data? If not, what other factors might explain them? And they tell us that Kennedy's PE multiple is 8 times, or 8x. All right, let's slide over and look at how we solve I. All right, and then we'll move on. We'll move on to J as well. Okay, now I've gone ahead and solved this ahead of time. It's pretty straightforward. We want to determine the PE ratios, so I've dropped in the price, which was given in the data up top. Kennedy was 36, Strasberg was 65. The earnings was $4.50 and $7.50 for Strasberg. So the PE ratio, we simply divide the two, right? Take price divided by earnings, and we come up with $8.867. Okay, and then the question about is this reasonable, we need to tackle. And what we can see is that the ratios really aren't consistent with G, growth, or with return on equity, which we've looked at earlier. We would think that Kennedy should have the higher price PE ratio. And that's as a result of what we saw in ROE and growth. You can see Kennedy is higher than Edelman, and I think if we look at growth, which is right up here, Kennedy was 8.4 in dividends per share and 7.4, also higher in earnings per share, which is really more critical to the question we're looking at. And that takes care of part I. Now, let's slide back and look at J. Okay, we go over here. That's probably close enough, right? Okay, slide on over here, and J says, now determine a range of values for Edelman's stock price with 400,000 shares outstanding by applying Kennedy's and Strasberg's PE ratios, price-dividend ratios, and price-to-book values to your data for Edelman. For example, one possible price would be take the $8, the PE for Kennedy, times the EPS for Edelman of $3 and come up with $24 per share, and then work similar calculations. Okay, so let's see how we would solve J. And I've done that again ahead of time just to save some time. Okay, let me slide here so we can see more of this. And just concentrate on J before we look at K in a little bit. Okay, so first with J we have to come up with the multiples. Okay, and we've already computed the PE multiple for Kennedy and Strasberg earlier. In fact, that came from N68 right there. Okay, and Strasberg's comes from cell N69, which again is right there. Okay, if we look at the price per dividend multiple, what we take is the value in L68, the price, and divide it by the dividend for Kennedy in 2007, which was $2.25. We can do the same thing for Strasberg, taking the $65 price and divide it by the $3.75 dividends. Okay, price per book, we would take the price and divide it by the book value of $30 for Strasberg. The $65 price divided by the $55 book value per share. Okay, so now we have a table of multiples that we can use, and then we can calculate indicated market price for Edelman based on the stock of Kennedy and Strasberg. So based on earnings, what we would do is we take the PE multiple and then multiply it, or actually we take the value in N47 and multiply it times L72. Well, what is our N47? If we're using PE multiples, it's got to be earnings, right? So if we go up to N47, that's right there, and we get Edelman's earnings per share. Now we'll also use the $1.50 and 22 in the later calculations. So again, here we're using the earnings to come up with the multiple. Then we use the dividends, right? So we're going to take the dividends by the multiple we used for Kennedy, and then we'll also take the book value times the price to book multiple for Kennedy, and we come up with indicated market prices based on these factors, looking at Kennedy as a comparable company. And we do the same thing with Strasbourg, right? We take the multiple, we take the earnings again for Strasbourg time the PE multiple to come up with price based on earnings. And we come up with a multiple for price. The price dividends multiple gives us 17.33, multiply it times dividends, we come up with another $26 price. And if we use book value, we use the 1.18 price to book multiple for Strasbourg, multiplying it times the book value of Edelman. Okay? And we come up with our range of stocks. And that takes care of part I and J.